Welcome to Brain Talk Tuesday. Today, this is Danielle Daniel, and I am the Holistic Psych. I'm a Doctor of Clinical Psychology student, and I'm an LCSW. So if you're joining live or the recording, please say hello. I love to do these Brain Talk Tuesdays. Every Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific time. I do live on Facebook and then repost onto my YouTube channel, which you can find at Danielle Daniel. So every single week, we take a different subject. And today's subject is obviously something that is very important, that I want to share some words of advice and some things from my expertise so that we can all be more aware and help other people. So today's subject is the signs of suicide and how you can lend a helping hand. How do you know when to, and how do you know what is going on? So before we get started, if you're watching live on Facebook or recorded, go ahead and share this, because this is going to be something that will really create some awareness, because I know this is a hot subject right now, especially with some current pretty big, celebrities that have committed suicide. And we need to talk about how to prevent and why suicide is not really a great choice. So I'm going to go into some of the science, some of the research from my books, as well as my expertise. So as you get started, say hello and feel free to share this so that we can spread this knowledge around everywhere. So my expertise is actually in suicide intervention. And as a LCSW, I worked at an inner city high school where I dealt with suicide intervention on a daily basis. We had the highest risk for students that talked about committing suicide. So I daily was doing assessments, as well as police reports, referring for a police report of 5150 for those who were going to harm themselves or others. So this is something I started to teach other therapists on. So I'm going to bring some awareness for those of you who may have others in your family who may be struggling or anything like that. So first, let's talk about some of the statistics. Suicide risk factors. Your highest risk factor for those that actually verbalize and talk about suicide are teenagers, especially female teenagers. They have the highest of the verbalization, but the myth is that they are your highest risk, and they're not your highest risk. Teenagers actually have your lowest rate, especially the female, and this being why? Because they communicate it. So one of your first tips to in talking about suicide prevention is communication. Having people communicate, just even verbalizing. So a myth is that when people say they're going to commit suicide, that they're more likely to do it if they talk about doing it. And the actual reality is they're less likely to do it if they talk about it. Because a lot of times, especially with teenagers, they will use it as a way to express that they just feel like helpless inside. And they're not as verbal as expressing other emotions, and so they kind of use suicide as a way to talk about, I need help. So this is something you want to understand, is that teenagers will verbalize it the most, and it's not an attention seeker, it's a way of communicating some emotions. Okay, so do you guys know who has, I'm looking at my notes here, but who has the, which category of people have the highest rate for actually committing suicide? It's males in their 60s, and more specifically, white males. So it's, and the reason being is, there's a few reasons we're going to talk about. They have a higher completion rate. They use a weapon of choice that doesn't have like a time where you can get them to the hospital and pump their stomach. It's just done. And then they don't communicate it as much. Okay, so those are some of the reasons why males in your 60s, and especially white males, but all males are obviously, we've seen Robin Williams and Anthony Bourdain the other day. So this is a very serious risk for that age group. So thinking of people that you know that maybe have one of these risk factors that we're going to talk about, just reaching out to them can be huge. So rates are linked of suicide to depression and alcohol abuse. So females have a higher rate of being treated for depression. They actually go in and seek help, where males have a lower rate of treatment for depression, and then males have a higher rate of alcohol abuse. So it's just, they're really your higher risk group. And then obviously we talked about females have a higher rate of communicating their emotions, and that is a way to release what is going on rather than having it just pent up, and then they actually make a choice that ends their life. So the emotional risk factors that you want to look for is feelings and verbalizations of hopelessness. Anything where it's just like the glass is so half empty, they can't even see any light at the end of the tunnel. A lot of times you want to look for what we call terminal thinking, where it's just everything has an end to it. What I used to do when I was assessing suicide, I would ask teenagers after, assessing their suicide risk, I would say, what are your plans for this weekend? And if they had no plans, they're at higher risk for me. But if they're like, well, I'm going with my mom to the air show, that to me is forward thinking. So terminal thinking, they may be saying goodbye or selling a lot of stuff. Maybe if you ask them what they're doing this weekend, they just, maybe they're quiet or weird about it, or maybe they just don't have any idea. They're just so down and so terminal thinking. So that's the difference between forward and terminal thinking. So another risk factor, emotional risk factor, is social disengagement, isolation, and then high feelings of shame and guilt. Okay, so those are some of the things you want to look for. I know all of us during life, kind of go through different emotions, but it's when these emotions are their lifestyle for many, for a longer period of time, let's just say. 3 top life stressors. There's actually quite a few on the list, but I'm going to just talk about the top 3 life stressors that give a higher risk for suicide. And the number 3 is any physical illness. So if they're dealing with a physical illness, just chronic pain on a daily basis, that's a higher risk with these other factors that we've talked about. Number 2 is unemployment. Especially, that's why, males in their 60s, when they're kind of the sole provider or and they lose their job at a later age, it's just like, gosh, what do you do? Start over? And that's the type of thinking, is it's harder to have hope than for someone who's 25. I'm just like, okay, I'm going to do a different career. So you can kind of look for those risk factors. And then the number 1 reason that people have reported that when people have survived from attempting suicide, they reported their number 1 reason was financial concerns. So those are, I hope, can help you with some categories and thinking about people you can reach out to. Every single one of us has people in our family that, whether they're at suicide risk or not today, but you could still do something to reach out and just let them know you're there and that you care about them. It doesn't even have to be, you could just give them a text message sometimes. Send a card. It doesn't have to be anything major, but here's the key for prevention is that people know that they can go to someone and talk to them. If they know they have a safe space they can talk to someone, then they're more likely to seek some help rather than just feel like I have nobody I can turn to. So let's talk about some neurotransmitter dysfunction. Serotonin is the most involved in depression, and depleted levels of serotonin have been found in the brain tissue of suicide completers. So serotonin is a pretty big one. So we'll talk about some ways, especially for just, now again, I'm going to tell you food, essential oils. Okay, this is not a treatment or heal a diagnosis. I'm going to talk about some essential oils and some food that help with serotonin in a healthy functioning brain. So this is some ways that you can do for yourself, just healthy brain function. We always go into this. And you know what? If it's going to help someone that's really having, some severe depression, and it can help just a tiny bit with increasing some serotonin levels so they can have a little bit more clarity of thought, then I think it's worth a try, absolutely. So some food that help, because we know that over 95% of our serotonin is found in our gut. So we know healthy food and diet play a huge role in serotonin. Less than 1% is in the brain, you guys. So when you're looking at food or prevention and all those types of things, being involved in health is really important. So food that is found high in serotonin are going to be eggs, eggs and cheese, pineapples, nuts and seeds, blueberries, sweet potatoes, vitamin B6 and 12. So there's many more, but that like dark chocolate's another one. But I'm just kind of giving you some of the key foods that I have found that help with serotonin. Folate is another vitamin. So taking a multivitamin, I do the Lifelong Vitality Pack by doTERRA, and it is incredible. It actually, and the reason why I bring this up, well, A, because I love it and I use it, but folate. And the research shows folate. If you look at most vitamins, what do they give you? They give you folic acid, which is a synthetic form of folate. Lifelong Vitality Pack gives you folate. I think it's really important to have the actual natural source, and that's why I like the doTERRA Lifelong Vitality Pack, especially when you're talking about brain health and brain function. This is so important. Another thing that I like to do, like for, on a daily basis, so some regimens, is every morning, just before I eat breakfast, like, I'm not like starving right off the bat, so I do a little handful of nuts, and I mix those nuts, like, not at one time, but for maybe a week or so, I'll be eating, like right now I had pistachios, just raw organic pistachios. I do a little handful, that's it. And maybe another morning I'll do walnuts. Another morning I'll do pecans. Another morning it's sunflower seeds. Another morning it's pumpkin seeds. So I just, in the bins in the organic store, I just get different nuts. And I just do that every single morning as a daily habit. And then like blueberries, when they're in season like they are right now, I just add those on my cereal or my shake. Sweet potatoes, obviously super easy to eat. Just put them in the oven and bake it. And then obviously if we get pineapples in season, so just noticing when those things are in season. Eggs I get from a local farm that are all raised with organic and nature, not in cages, just able to free roam. So if you can really look at how you can help your children or your family members, or just in general health prevention in the brain, these are some good sources of serotonin. For as far as essential oils for serotonin, there's many that have been linked to helping with healthy production of serotonin. So that's clary sage. I've got that right here. Okay, this is a really good one. I'll give you a regimen after, but I'll just give you all the oils, and then obviously you can purchase or download my free download that has this information on it, or you can purchase my handouts that have all this information too. So clary sage, lavender, petitgrain, Roman chamomile, rosemary, there's a lot of oils on here, patchouli, lemon, I see lots of hearts going by, these are oils you guys must like, peppermint, orange, grapefruit, tangerine, marjoram, and rose. Bergamot, another one. So your citruses are going to be big ones. So yes, what you would want to do, those are some individual oils. What I highly recommend is get on a daily regimen just for the brain in general and do a capsule of, I would do lemon and rosemary, 1 drop of lemon, 1 drop of rosemary, and do that for a week, see how you feel. And then maybe you want to mix it up and do lemon and clary sage the next week. Lemon's a given because you've got all those citruses, and lemon's so good at cleansing the gut. And we know the gut is the key. So again, lemon, and you could even mix it and do grapefruit or tangerine. Do 1 citrus and maybe a marjoram, 1 citrus and another oil. That's how I do my capsules. And then, or you can put them in your water as well, but marjoram in your water is not so good. And then another thing is just using the oils on pulse points on the neck and on the bottom of the big toe are going to be a great regimen just to keep the brain healthy functioning. So I would do every single morning. You could do peppermint. I would do actually pepper on the back of my neck, but you could do petitgrain maybe on the bottom of the big toe and patchouli. And then at night, I'm just looking at my list here, do lavender and clary sage on the bottom of your big toe, and just mix things up, because you'll find what works for you, but at least start with some type of regimen because the variety is important. It's just like eating food, you guys. I mean, these are plants, right? You don't just eat the same salad every single day. You need some variety. And honestly, I do kind of eat the same salad every day because I just buy the same thing at the store sometimes. But mixing, making sure you have zucchinis in your salad at times, or onions, or mushrooms, just mixing up, that's what you want to do with the oils as well. So that's some tips. You can go to my website and download at danielledr.com for free this little handout where it talks about different oils that are associated with these neurotransmitters. So danielledr.com on the front homepage, or you can go to danielledr.com on the shop page, and you can shop all of the handouts that are more thorough, obviously, and have lots of different things for the brain. So go into anxious emotions, focus, attention, memory, learning, everything. So I would go to danielledr.com /shop, and you'll be able to find those. So as far as prevention, a few things that have been helpful that they've shown in research is talking with someone. Just letting them know that you're feeling suicidal. That's a huge one. Exercise. Getting involved. This is, I'm going to just tell you these and then we'll talk about the reality, but getting involved in some type of group setting. Maybe it's a painting group, or maybe it's just a church group, or maybe some type of other support group, alcohol support group, AA, something like that. Having hobbies or projects. One thing I would do with my kiddos when I was counseling with teens that were suicidal is we would get on Pinterest. And I would say, what are you interested in? If it was recipes and cooking, then I would have them make a board of cooking and just pin all these recipes that they want to try. And each week, we just have them try a new recipe. Or maybe, it was some other, woodworking. So you want to have them, Pinterest is a good way just to kind of help the brain, because creativity is really stimulating in the mind. And it helps you have forward thinking. It helps you with projects. It just... creative thinking and projects are very crucial. So I would help them find some type of creative way to express themselves. And then the two last things I want to talk about. One is they have found when people have a faith, some type of church group or religious association, that they seem to cope better and have less suicide completion. So I would recommend, even if you have maybe negative feelings towards, me even mentioning the idea of church, I recommend giving it a try. Go to a new church. Try something where you can find a community of faith, because it gives you some coping tools to have a higher power that you can believe in that helps you manage with what's going on with you. And this has been shown in research time and time again. So I think this is very important. And then the last thing I want to talk about before we end our little Brain Talk Tuesday is the reality is we have that swarm around us. We have, just like we have radio waves that, swarm around us, and cell phone waves now that swarm around us, we have negative and positive psychology that swarm around us all the time. And because there are depression or alcohol, when there are substances or just genetics where your brain has a harder time with producing serotonin, and it gives you have a harder time combating off that negative psychology, it can sink in. And what I want you to understand is letting people know, or yourself know, that negative psychology is not you. It's not your true self. And sometimes when we can separate that negative psychology and just say, hey, this is not who I truly am, it will help you combat it away from you, because it does not need to sink in, but it does, because we start to take it on as our own thoughts. And those negative, if you think, this is what I mean. When you were born, right, you were this little tiny baby. Was that baby full of anything negative? Nothing. They're the sweetest. That's why when you're around babies, it feels so uplifting and spiritual, because that's all they're full of. And that energy of a baby, right, gets emitted into the air, and if you take it on, and you feel happy and more serotonin. So do you see what I'm saying? This is a real science that we emit negative, positive psychology all the time, and it's just around on this earth as well, and not coming from yourselves. So if you at one time were this little tiny baby, total pure spirit and just happiness, that's your true self. And you don't have to take on the negative psychology that has been, picked up like lint, right, throughout your life. You can brush it off. It's not you, and it's not part of your actual spirit. And so I just want you to understand that, because if we can take it outside of self, this is not my true self, and you can just stop putting more blame and shame and guilt on yourself, it will absolutely help uplift your thoughts and your thoughts about yourself, because that's really the key. And finding, again, some hope in that you have a purpose. And I just want to share one last little story. As I saw a YouTube video of a guy that had tried to commit suicide by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, and he survived. And he now is such an inspiration. He shares his story of where he was, why he thought suicide was his only hope in life left, just to end his negative psychology. And he shares how people can overcome it just like he did. And obviously, he is so grateful. He is so grateful that he didn't actually complete suicide, and that now he can be a light and a hope for other people. So we all have a bigger purpose here. And if you or somebody who's really contemplating or feeling just down and feeling suicidal, help them find their larger purpose. Their journey of feeling, struggling with depression could actually inspire somebody else. But we have to get out of our heads and think about how we can help other people. And that's a major way of how we can actually help our brains, is by serving other people and stop going down the spiral of death in our brains, because that spiral, it is not healthy and it doesn't lead to anywhere productive. So I hope you guys can get some pointers and tips that we can all help one another, because that's really what we're here for. Reach out to somebody, share this, help them know that there is hope on the other side, and especially that your experiences, they can either make you bitter or better. And you can choose which path would be really important for you, and find how that your experiences that you've gone through, even if it's just negative psychology that you've taken on, how you can get rid of it and how you can share with other people how you were able to brush that off. So thank you guys for joining for this Brain Talk Tuesday. I felt this was something very important to talk about with uplifting mood and just reaching out and serving other people. So have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much. Bye.